go. Hello, I'm Daryl McQuinn. I'm the Director of Technology for St. Louis Public Radio, and today I'm going to show you how I use Pathfinder and how it makes some things easier and how it keeps me a little more organized with my entire Axia environment. So I'll start out with a screen that I use in my office. I have this on a PC in my office running all the time, 24 hours a day. And I'll start on the left-hand side. And by the way, these are just things that I figured out on my own. I've not taken any classes or even had a lot of instruction. I read the book and figured out how to do some things. So first of all, we'll start with this one on the left. I called it mini meters. And it's basically just a list of meters all stacked up in a row, as you can see, and labeled so that I know what's going on and what's working and what's not working. I include things like my streams, which are up here in the upper right, mainstream, classical stream, jazz stream. So I can see my streams are working. I also, on the bottom left, you can see my KWMU Air, which is our main radio station, and also our two HD stations. So I can see the stations are on the air. I can also see networks. You can see in the middle on the left, JazzWorks and classical. Those are my two music networks that are coming in from the satellite. I can see those are working. And at a glance, you can see the WQUB HD3 is not working. And that's due to a failure of a receiver on site. And we're working on that. And on the other two that aren't working is an alternate stream and then NPR News, which only pops up at the top of the hour. So I can tell at a glance if what's working and what's not working. Then we'll move on to the right and we'll see the autopilot, which has nothing to do with Axia, but I can see if my stations are all four on, transmitters are on and up to power, and I do have troubles with my WQUB connection right now. Moving on down to the bottom, I have a Pathfinder panel that I made for the inputs to my Comrex codecs. And I have three Comrexes, and basically I built this so that I could switch easily without having to go to the website or to the Axia nodes themselves and change the input. So I can quickly change the input, and I'll actually click on it and show you that I can change. Now EAS is feeding Comrex 1, and now I'm back to the standard mix minus, so that if anyone calls that up on an element console, they'll get a mix minus. I use that in case I need to send a feed to someone on a brick link of the program, which is the EAS output, our standard program, or also I send the talk control room for some program we might be uplinking to NPR. So it's a quick and easy way to change inputs to the Comrex. Next to that, on the right, in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, is the one I call GPIO monitors and switch. We have a Sunday night jazz program that plays on our main channel, and it requires a contact closure to play the breaks. And so normally, as you see right now, none of the yellow shows that there are no GPIOs going. Main 7 is the computer, audio vault computer that has an Axia driver in it. And I actually just flipped that GPO on and off using Pathfinder. Using this panel, actually, when I push this button, it switches the JazzWorks GPI on, and therefore when JazzWorks sends a contact closure or a GPIO, it will actually play the breaks. So I can easily see that that is not on right now. On Sunday night, I have a timer in Pathfinder that turns this on and then turns it back off again at the end of the program. I do the same thing on the right-hand side for the same input. This is the AV main input. On the right-hand side, I switch the DPO KWMU, which is a depot, I call it, which is basically a satellite channel. And I feed that GPIO to flip the same audio vault Axia driver, actually, on that computer on and off to take contact closures from the main NPR channel if we do that, which we rarely do, but I have the ability just with a click of a switch to set a program to fire off breaks if somebody needs to leave the room for a while. So that's a quick switch to turn that on. And I basically duplicate the same thing below that on the middle two for our backup audio vault as well. And at the very bottom, it's an on-off switch to turn a GPIO off for our jazz, so that if the get out of sync, I can turn it off for a while and synchronize the breaks and then turn it back on. So we record breaks with that. So basically turning off GPIOs using the Pathfinder panel here. And the last, and another one that I'll talk about briefly is this digital clock. I put this on there just so when people come to my room to talk or find out or just see what's going on or have a request, the on-air announcer can keep an eye on it just by looking at the back of my room. And I have this on the wall. They can see what time it is and know if they've got time to talk or not. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is basically another switcher using a panel. And I built this on Pathfinder as well, is my HD source and PPM switcher. And it's basically, you need to have some sort of way to put your backup PPM on the air. Some people just go back and move the XLR connectors. I do it with this switcher. Instead of having to go to the Axia node itself, I can basically just push the yellow button and I'm flipped on. I now have the HD2 on the backup PPM processor, and I can go back and put it back on the main processor. So if we have a problem with any of our PPM switchers, I can quickly and easily put it on the backup. Now, what I also do is whenever you press any of these buttons, as I've explained in this note, the note actually keeps a reminder for me what it actually does. When I switch any of those three inputs, a logic flow in Pathfinder also switches the PPM to my Rincon, which is actually a backup STL, and to our other stations. So this one switch switches all of the main PPMs and all the HD2 and all the HD3. So I don't have to worry about going and switching the main, the backup, and all that. It does all of them in one place. And I talked about here the logic flow in Pathfinder, and I'll show you how that works now. I'll switch from this screen to my Pathfinder screen, and I'll go to logic flows and then open up logic flows. And I have all my PPM flows in a folder called PPM flows. And you can see here that these are the PPM flows that I've built. You can see that if I change the classical input, it passes through here and it makes the backup L for low, and it passes through there and makes the Rincon and the WQUB also go low, which is the backup. So it's basically passes through and switch to. Maybe other ways to do it. That's the way I chose. And I have that for all three of our channels, classical, jazz, and our main. And then also I'm changing the input to the PPMs down here, because we have a main PPM, we have a backup PPM, we have a main stream and a backup stream PPM. So when you change the input to the PPM, it also changes input to the other PPMs as well. So for instance, I have the choice of playing JazzWorks, the network, directly to all the PPMs, or HD Play, which is my HD player, my jazz player, to there. And I'm actually using that 5 times an hour. This switches, and it switches all three of these inputs so that all of those get fed the breaks and the network as needed by the automation system. And finally, I do the same thing with the classical, but I'm basically switching between the main player and the backup player to the PPM. And the last PPM I want to show is under my other flows. And there's two in here I'll talk about. One is the squawk, which is squawk is a term that's used by the public radio and NPR that gives you an update on any kind of live breaking news that's happening. They just start talking down a satellite channel called the squawk channel. And if you have that fed to an amplifier and a speaker, you will hear it. So I like that to come out of the Q speaker in the control room. And on an Axia channel, the external preview has to be turned on and off. So I feed the squawk channel to the Q external input, and this actually turns that on and off. I've taken an audio alarm, which is a silence alarm, a squawk enable silence alarm. So when there's when there's not silence, actually when there's silence, it alarms, but all it really does is turns on this enable. And then I say when it's on, when there's talking, it turns that on. It kind of reverses the silence alarm. It's more of a talking alarm, if you will. So that's that, and that works out pretty well. I'm actually turning on a GPIO in an Axia Windows driver again, which controls that external preview on the Axia Element console. And finally, I have we do a network, the Metropolitan Opera, every Saturday afternoon, which is a separate network from our standard classical channel. And Pathfinder has a timer that switches to the Metropolitan Opera at noon every week. But because the ending is not timed, it just switches back when it's over. I have a system set up here that says if the network is on, if Metropolitan Opera is feeding play 2 and the GPIO sent, both of those have to be true, then switch the HD2 player back to 16103, which is the network. So that's a handy tool as well. Those are the basic things that I use. The last thing I'll show you is timers, and I have a lot of timers, and they really can do a lot. For instance, we record a lot of programs. I have one recorder set, and this changes the input to that recorder. It's very simple to add a timer. You say, I want to switch this particular Axia channel at this time, and then at another time, I'd like to switch it back to where it was. So it switches, based on time, and that's a really handy thing to have as well. I thank you for taking a look at this. I hope it helps you determine some things that you could do with your Axia Pathfinder. Thanks again.